Week 16 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I will bench this week. Time recording this video. None of these guys have been placed on the safety and protocol list. And I just got to mention that because this thing's going around rampant. And every hour it seems like the news has been changing. The first guy I would bench is Julio Jones of the Tennessee Titans. So Julio Jones, he left last week's ball game with that hamstring injury once again flaring up. But I'm surprised he on Thursday Night Football tonight that Julio Jones is playing in this ball game versus the San Francisco 49ers. But even if he was 100% this season here, it's been a total mess for Julio Jones, where he's really not doing anything this year here. The best ball game of the year was him for in Week 2 at Seattle. 6 catches, 128 yards. Besides that, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points in any other game he's played this season. So last week, he had 0 after getting hurt in that game on 1 target. And Week 14 in his return versus Jacksonville, 4 catches, 33 yards. So at this point here, in my opinion, Julio Jones is just a big name. But he's not really doing anything for fantasy owners. Would it surprise me tonight versus San Francisco, him have a big fantasy day? No, but no way in a semifinals ball game I could trust him, where this season he's been injured and he hasn't done anything besides Week 2. So in my opinion, he's an easy wide receiver to bench this week. And if he goes off, good for him, but no way I could trust him in these circumstances. The second wide receiver is Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. So Amari Cooper, it's been a bad year for him. I'm not going to lie about it. I know he's had a couple good games. I know he was injured and also on the COVID list as well for a few weeks here. But the last few weeks since he returned in Week 13 for Cooper at New Orleans, 2 catches, 41 yards. Week 14 at the same Washington defense, 5 catches, 51 yards with the touchdown that bailed them out. And then last week, Week 15 at the Giants, 2 catches, 8 yards. So right here, good matchup, no doubt about it, versus Washington in Week 16. That gives up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. But Amari Cooper this season, he just hasn't been the same. He's taken a backseat, in my opinion, in the passing game behind CeeDee Lamb. And even Dalton Schultz, I think, has been more productive for fantasy owners for the most part this year than Amari Cooper. So right now, he's the third guy over there in this offense. Could he have a big game? No doubt about it. But for my taste, he's been too inconsistent here as Cooper. And even with a good matchup, it's tough to trust him unless he's going to be a flex option or you're in a deeper league with no other options. But this week here, I'm going to think he's not going to do much. Could he have a big game? Yes, but the way his track record's been this season, it's tough to trust him and tough to start him this week. The next guy's Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team. So Scary Terry, he was a high draft pick coming into the year. And early in the season, he's been a great fantasy player, no doubt about it. But the last few weeks here for him, he's another guy that's been inconsistent and doing nothing. And a guy hard to trust here with a tough matchup at the Dallas Cowboys in Week 16. So the last few weeks for him, Week 12 versus Seattle, 4 catches, 51 yards. Week 13 at Vegas, 3 catches, 22 yards. Week 14 versus Dallas, he got hurt in that game, but he still had 3 targets. And Trevion Diggs shut him down, and he hit his head on the turf for a minor concussion. But he came back in Week 15 at Philly, but only had 2 catches, 51 yards. The good news is here for McLaurin, though, that Taylor Heineke's coming back most likely in this ball game. And he's had the best results with Heineke, no doubt about it, is McLaurin. But with Dallas playing great defense this season, with Trevion Diggs getting better each and every week, shutting down his man instead of going for that big pick six or big play, it's going to be a tough matchup, no doubt about it, here for McLaurin. And like I mentioned, the last few weeks here, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points since Week 11. So that's not a good sign here for McLaurin. I know fantasy owners are going to go out there and start McLaurin because he was one of their high picks this season in fantasy leagues. But right here, I just don't see him having a good game. And if he does, great. But the way things have been going for him, it's tough to trust him in a semifinals game as well. The next wide receiver is Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Smith here, the Heisman Trophy winner last season in college football. In my opinion, it's been an underwhelming season for the most part. I know he had a few big games early in the season and then weeks 9 and 10, but ever since then, the numbers have gone down. Week 12 at the Giants, 2 catches, 22 yards. Week 13 at the Jets, 2 catches, 15 yards. And then last week versus Washington in a plus matchup, 3 catches, 40 yards. So once again here, Devonta Smith and the Eagles versus the New York Giants in Week 16. That give up the 10th most fantasy points to receivers. But going back to that Week 12 game, he did nothing in that one. 2 catches, 22 yards. So right here, number one target in this offense, no doubt about it, is Dallas Goedert in the passing game. But the Eagles like running the football a lot with Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard. And obviously that worked a lot versus the Washington football team in Week 15, where they ran for over 200 yards in that ball game. And Jalen Hurts likes running the ball as well here, where he usually gets 40 or 50 yards a game. So right here, Devonta Smith, him and Hurts just haven't connected this season, especially on the deep ball and especially in the end zone. And with his numbers going down over the last few weeks, he's an easy wide receiver to bench, in my opinion. And the fifth and final guy is another guy who's underperformed big time this season. And I had high hopes for him this year, but he's a guy I can't trust. And it's not all his fault. Ben Roethlisberger hasn't been getting Chase Claypool the ball this season. After last season, a monster rookie year, it was for Claypool. So the last few weeks for him, really nothing much to highlight here. Week 13 versus Baltimore, 2 catches, 52 yards, and 2 rushing yards. Week 14 in Minnesota, good game, 8 catches, 93 yards. And then last week, a total dud where a lot of people counted on him, including me, in the first round of the fantasy playoffs. 1 catch for 12 yards and 7 rushing yards, and that's not going to cut it. And Week 16 here, a tough matchup at the Kansas City Chiefs that give up the ninth least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. So with a tough matchup, with Big Ben just not producing for his wide receivers and getting the ball to his playmakers, there's no way I could trust him in a semifinal matchup. And this week here, I got a decent amount of big names on this wide receivers to bench. But these guys, with their track record over the last few weeks, they're not producing. I can't trust them in a big spot. I still could see some of these guys I've mentioned on the list have a good game. But in my opinion, I think most of them are going to bust out and not do much in this one. So that's a few wide receivers I would bench here for Week 16 of the fantasy football season.